Have you ever been curious who the 12 disciples were? Then this is the video for you. Let's talk about the 12 disciples. Hello and welcome back to Bible Basics. So in my last video, we covered Matthew 10, and in that chapter, they listed off the 12 disciples. I thought it'd be interesting if we go through some of their lives, some of their personalities to see why they were important, and to see kind of what their stories were. This takes place in Matthew 10, 2 to 4, which I will read. These are the names of the 12 apostles. First, Simon, who is called Peter, and his brother Andrew. James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the tax collector, James son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, Simon the zealot, and Judas Iscariot who betrayed him. So a bit on their personalities, we only know about two of their personalities. So one being Peter, he was very fiery and intense. There's a story in the Bible where when Jesus was being arrested, he chopped off one of the guard's ears and he was very passionate. And then John, he's kind of funny. So he wrote four books of the Bible. He wrote one of the Gospels, and in the Gospels, he actually writes that he is the one who Jesus loved. He refers to himself as the one that Jesus loved. And spoilers, when they're going to Jesus' tomb, he says that him and Peter raced there and he beat Peter. And I don't know why he thought to include that, but he did. I want to focus on three disciples to begin with. So that being Peter, John, James. So they're part of Jesus' inner circle. They were there during Jesus' major moments in life. I'm going to read three verses in the Bible that highlights this. So the first one is when he heals the synagogue's leader's daughter, which we read earlier in Matthew, but we're going to be reading off Mark just so we don't get confused. This is Mark chapter 5, verse 37. He did not let anyone follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. He only allowed them three to go in with him. Why, I'm not too sure, but they seem to have a more intimate relationship with Jesus than the rest of the disciples. In this next one, this is where it's called the Transfiguration, where Jesus took the three of them to the top of this mountain and where he had this moment with God. So it's very special. This is Mark chapter 9, verse 2. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. Basically, his face was transformed. They kind of saw his holiness. It was a very intimate moment as well. And this one, this is moments before Jesus is arrested and he's handed over to the religious leaders to be crucified. So this is literally the day before he's being handed over. Mark chapter 14, verse 32 through 33. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. So again, right before he's about to be handed over to them, he brought his inner circle to him to pray with him. So I think it was more of a comfort thing at that point as well, because he knew what his fate was. And obviously, it says he was deeply disturbed and troubled. So about Peter, too, is that Peter was instrumental in forming the early church. One of the verses, too, Jesus said, "On this rock I will build my church," talking about Peter. Interesting tidbit about Peter is he was actually crucified upside down. So the story goes that when it was his time to die, they were going to crucify him, but he said, "I do not deserve to be crucified like my Lord." So he had them crucified upside down. John, he also wrote four books in the Bible. They say how he died was he was exiled in a foreign country. John also wrote four books in the Bible, and maybe five, but the fifth one is kind of contentious. But he wrote four for sure, and he died in a foreign country, so he died of old age. It's said to be he's the only disciple who died of old age, but I'm not too sure. And then I want to focus on two more. Matthew, he is the author. He was one of the disciples. That's interesting about him is that he says when he's listing the 12 disciples, he lists himself as Matthew, the tax collector. His contribution obviously is important because he wrote Matthew. I like the fact that he brings up that he was a tax collector. He wants to remind us that he himself came from a background of sinning and duping people, and he was transformed by Jesus. And I think it's important that we highlight that because sometimes a testimony means more coming from someone who was super far from Jesus. I like to think of someone who's been in jail and they hurt people, they were a bad person, they did all these things, but then Jesus transformed their life. I think sometimes that testimony means a lot more to people because so people can relate to that and you can see the change. It's a complete 180. On the opposite of the spectrum is Judas, the disciple who betrayed him. So he's the opposite of Matthew. Instead of starting his life far away from Jesus and ending up with Jesus, he started with Jesus and he ended up being apart from Jesus. He's a cautionary tale of what can happen. I've personally been in that position as well, where I'm with Jesus and I decide that I don't want to be with Jesus anymore. And my life isn't that great. I feel empty. I feel depressed. I feel like I don't have purpose in life. That's how it works too. Jesus is giving us that option as well. We're not tied to him if we don't want to. It's an unfortunate reality of life is that we could be apart from Jesus. We can choose to be apart from Jesus. In Judas' case, we get a firsthand experience of Jesus and we still choose to turn away from him. But we have free will and that's an option that we have. So I like how they have those two disciples, one who was far away from Jesus but ended up with Jesus and was transformed by him, or someone who was with Jesus, saw all his miracles, saw all the things he did for these people, and he still chose to betray him and chose to be selfish for his own gain. But hey, 11 out of 12 ain't bad, so that's pretty good. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, comment down below who your favorite disciple is. I think for me it's John. I think he's funny. I think the fact that he writes the stuff about him like in the first person, how he's the one who Jesus loved, I think that's kind of funny. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.